Alright, so this next video is for all my history buffs out there. You know what I mean? I look to y'all to figure out whether this stuff is real valid and different things like that. You know? So these rare historical photos we come across, I look to y'all to see if, you know what I mean, they align. So let's check this video out with some history book facts. Let's go.
We'll be remembered more for what we destroy than what we create. Chuck Palahniuk. It's true that we remember the macabre and grim chapters of human history more than the others. These photos, however, are here to remind us of the stories that history books often dismiss. From job hunting in the 1930s to the forgotten hero dog, here are 20 rare, shocking historical photos you won't find in history books. Number 20. Job hunting during the Great Depression. A lot of things happened from 1929 to the 1930s. Bad luck, poor decisions, systemic flaws, and a whole lot of other things led to the crash of the stock market. In October 1929, the American economy crashed. Now, there isn't a single cause for the Great Depression. However, the stock market crash of 1929 is one of the major catalysts. In the 1920s, many people began investing in the stock market. Stocks are like shares of a company that you can buy. If a company does well, the value of your stock increases. People were excited about the economy and believed they could make a lot of money quickly, so they kept buying more stocks. Now, these investors didn't really have enough money to buy stocks outright. So what did they do? They borrowed money from banks. This was fine as long as they profited from the investments, right? Unfortunately, with more and more people buying stocks, the prices overheated. The prices became too high. Some even exceeded the value of the companies selling their stocks. It was the tipping point. In October 1929, the bubble burst. Stock prices started falling rapidly, and people panicked. They tried to sell their stocks quickly, but with so many people selling, prices fell even more. On the 29th of October 1929, also known as Black Tuesday, the stock market crashed, meaning it lost a huge amount of value in just one day. After the crash, many people couldn't pay back the money they borrowed to buy stocks, and banks started losing money too. Without money, banks failed, and people lost their money. The crash caused people to lose confidence in the economy. This led people to stop spending money, which in turn decreased business profits. This then led to less production and decreased need for employees.
It was like the perfect storm. You know what I mean? That's the best way to put it. It was the perfect storm. And the sad part about it is, still to this day, you hear about people. You can go on Twitter and see people posting and telling different stories and stuff like that about how they took a loan out to invest in the stock market. That's a serious gamble. That's a serious gamble. Like, nothing's a sure thing. So, you know me, I love the stock market. So this story right here always plays in the back of my mind just to keep me humble and to keep me on track to not do nothing stupid. I know I will do something crazy. You know, I come from like a gambling background, so I always have to keep myself in between the lines because I'll veer out at any moment. So keeping this story and things like this in the back of your mind just kind of keeps you intact.
Employees. It was a domino effect. A single crash led to the fall of the others. This downward spiral resulted in the Great Depression. Now, there's no doubt that the job market today is, for the lack of a better term, dreadful. But job hunting in the 1930s was unimaginable, at least for that period. This photo shows a man in search of a job. He was so desperate that he hung a placard around his body that read, "I know 3 trades. I speak 3 languages, fought for 3 years, have 3 children, and no work for 3 months. But I only want 1 job." Heart-wrenching. Before we go on, like this video, smash the subscribe button, and click the notification bell right now. Number 19. Egypt in the 1920s. Perhaps some of you have visited Egypt. The Great Pyramids of Giza continue to awe tourists, but the land of Ra used to be different. This photo was taken in 1920s Cairo, 100 years ago. Back then, Egypt's oases were more vibrant. These oases, such as the famous Siwa oases, were vital to the country's economy and culture. They served as agricultural hubs where date palms and olive trees flourished. sustained by the life-giving waters of underground aquifers. In the 1920s, the oases were not just agricultural centers, but also cultural ones, where ancient customs and ways of life persisted despite the rapid changes occurring elsewhere in Egypt. Today, however, these oases are much different than they were a century ago. Number 18. Oldest Native American to ever live. This is Chief John Smith, also known as White Wolf or Wrinkled Meat. He's one of the most enigmatic figures in Native American history. Born around 1784, according to some accounts, he was a member of the Chippewa people and spent most of his life in the forests near Castle Lake, Minnesota. When he passed away in 1922, he claimed to be 137 years old, potentially making him the oldest Native American and perhaps the oldest person to have ever lived. But of course,
do y'all think we get to those ages? Because I can't really say get back to those ages. You know, like that was a norm at one time, because I don't know if that was ever a norm. But can we get there to where 130, 150, like hitting 200 is something of the norm? Do y'all think that'll ever be a possibility? And the reason why I ask that is because all of these anti-aging things that are happening in this day and age, I feel like that's what they're trying to do, prolong. And I just wondered if it'll be in our lifetime or it'll be several decades or centuries down the line before y'all think we see something like that.
Just like a lot of history, his age is disputed. Like the rest of the Chippewa people, John Smith's life is shrouded in mystery, partly due to the oral traditions and the lack of concrete records from that era. However, the stories about him paint a picture of a man who lived through remarkable times. He is said to have witnessed battles between the Chippewa and Sioux before 1810. Again, if this is true, John Smith was alive before the United States even existed as a country. Throughout his life, Smith was married 8 times, but had no biological children. He adopted a son, Tom Smith, who maintained that his father truly was as old as he claimed. Despite his advanced age, John Smith remained active until his death. Though some skepticism surrounds the exact details of his life, including his age, his story has been passed down through generations. Number 17. The wall that separated families for 28 years. This is a photo of a family carrying children over the Berlin Wall, a barrier that separated families for 28 long years. Built on August 13, 1961, in the dead of night, this wall divided Berlin into east and west by the next morning. After Germany's defeat in 1945, the country was divided into 4 occupation zones controlled by the United States, the Soviet Union, Britain, and France. Berlin, although deep within Soviet-controlled East Germany, was similarly divided into 4 sectors. As tensions between the Soviet Union and the Western Allies grew, Berlin became a focal point of the emerging Cold War. By the late 1950s, East Germany was hemorrhaging citizens. Over 2.5 million people fled from East to West Germany, most of them through Berlin. This mass exodus was not only a public relations disaster for the East German government, but also a significant loss of skilled workers and intellectuals. The construction of the wall was the Soviet and East German response to stem this flow and prevent the collapse of the Eastern Bloc's economy. The initial wire fence was soon replaced by concrete walls. Guard towers and minefields were also installed. This impossible barrier became more fortified over time, eventually stretching for about 96 miles, with 27 miles cutting directly through Berlin. On the East German side of the wall was a death strip where no man was permitted. Between 1961 and 1989, many lost their lives trying to cross the wall. Those who have been separated had no choice but to try and get a glimpse of their loved ones above the barrier. It wasn't until November 9, 1989, that the divide was demolished. Borders were opened by East German authorities that very same evening, and within hours, crowds of people began chipping away at both sides of the Berlin Wall, eager to see the fall of the barrier that separated them from their loved ones. Number 16. The Statue of Liberty in 350 people.
Sad thing about that, man, I don't know, maybe a while back you'd have asked me, could I see something like that ever happen again? I might have would have told you, nah, bro. We've moved past that type of thing, you know. We're better. And then now I look at things and I say, you know what? I don't know. I don't know. I couldn't tell you what's going to happen this day and age. Bro, I wouldn't be surprised if things like that happen or something similar. I wouldn't be surprised. And then you look at you look at the border crisis, and then you say, well, should it? What? Like, you it's just so many things going through your mind, man.
Pieces. The Statue of Liberty is one of the icons of the United States. Officially named Liberty Enlightening the World, this 151-foot statue was a gift from France to the United States for their centennial of the nation's Declaration of Independence. However, this statue didn't come in a single piece. You see, the statue was built in sections, and it was assembled like a giant puzzle. The iron framework, designed by Gustave Eiffel, yes, the same engineer who later designed the Eiffel Tower, was a groundbreaking piece of engineering that allowed the copper skin of the statue to move slightly in the wind, preventing cracks and structural damage. The statue was completed in France in 1884 and then disassembled into 350 individual pieces packed into 214 crates and shipped across the Atlantic Ocean to the United States. Upon arrival, it was reassembled on Liberty Island, a painstaking process that took 4 months. Finally, on October 28, 1886, the Statue of Liberty was unveiled to the public, with President Grover Cleveland presiding over the dedication ceremony. Number 15. The cosmonaut that broke into the atmosphere. On March 16, 1927, Vladimir Komarov was born. He would become one of the Soviet Union's most accomplished test pilots and cosmonauts. His end, however, was something no one could have imagined. Komarov was among the first cosmonauts selected by the Soviet space program. In fact, he was one of the best of the best. Komarov's first spaceflight was in October 1964 aboard Voskhod 1, where he became the first Soviet cosmonaut to fly into space twice. However, Komarov's most famous mission, Soyuz 1, was doomed from the start. What was supposed to be a major milestone for the Soviet Union became Komarov's ill-fated death. The mission was launched on the 23rd of April, 1967. The Soviets hoped to get a head start in the space race. However, Soyuz 1 was plagued with technical issues even before it left the ground. Despite these problems, political pressure ensured that the mission would proceed as planned. Once in orbit, the spacecraft suffered from a range of malfunctions. Its solar panels didn't deploy correctly, causing a critical power shortage. As an experienced pilot, Komarov tried to manually stabilize the spacecraft, but the situation continued to deteriorate. As the hours passed, it became clear that the mission was in serious jeopardy. The next day, on the 24th of April, Soyuz 1's parachutes failed to deploy properly during re-entry. The capsule plummeted to the ground, and Komarov perished on impact. His death was the first ever recorded during a spaceflight mission. The burnt chunk you see in this photo? That's the only remnant of him after re-entry. Number 14. Painting while dangling from the Eiffel Tower. The Eiffel Tower, made of wrought iron, requires regular maintenance to protect it from rust and the elements. This involves a massive painting job that takes place every 7 years. What many people don't know is that in the early days, some of the painters who worked on the Eiffel Tower did so without any harnesses or modern safety equipment. They balanced on narrow beams hundreds of feet above the ground. I don't know how much these men were paid, but I'm sure it wasn't enough. Number 13. The end of the Second World War. This is Times Square in the Big Apple. The year was 1945, and 2 million people gathered in Times Square.
But that's what, and 2 million people, that's a crazy number of people, bro. Man, like, that's back when you could have 2 million people lined up in the streets having fun and no issues and no problems. These days, 2 million people? No, I don't want to be nowhere near that. That just screams trouble to me. Something's about to happen.
Not to enjoy the sights, but for a celebration. On the 14th of August, 1945, the streets of New York City erupted in joy as the news spread. World War II was finally over. The announcement of Japan's surrender marked the end of a conflict that had ravaged much of the world for 6 long years. As the news of Japan's surrender flashed across the news tickers, thousands of people flooded into Times Square. Sailors, soldiers, and civilians gathered in a massive celebration. Confetti rained down from the surrounding buildings, filling the square with the sounds of cheering, music, and car horns. Strangers embraced, danced, and sang together, united in their shared relief and happiness. Number 12. The lesser-known facts about the Hoover Dam's construction. The Hoover Dam, originally known as Boulder Dam, was built to control flooding, provide irrigation water, and generate hydroelectric power. Standing 726 feet tall and 1,244 feet long, it was the tallest dam in the world at the time of its completion. The dam was constructed using 3.25 million cubic yards of concrete, enough to pave a 2-lane highway from San Francisco to New York City. To complete this massive project, thousands of workers flocked to the site, enduring brutal conditions in the
And a lot of them lost their lives. Like, the horror stories from this thing just continue to always play in my mind when I hear about this, bro.
Nevada desert. This photo shows one of the stages of the construction that isn't as frequently seen. I don't know about you, but this definitely looks like something out of this world to me. Number 11.
Out of this world? Bro, it looked like something unsafe. Go back to that view. Let me go back to that view. Like, and you can see what happened. Look at that. Look at how, yeah. And it's the stories that you hear. Like, I think it was a father and a son lost his, like a woman lost her husband and son to the building of this Hoover Dam.
Shows one of the stages of the construction that isn't as frequently seen. I don't know about you, but this definitely looks like something out of this world to me. Number 11. The Moai statues have bodies. The Moai statues of Easter Island, or Rapa Nui as it's known by the indigenous Polynesians, are some of the most mysterious and iconic artifacts on Earth. However, a general misconception about the Moai is that they're just heads. In reality, though, these statues have entire bodies. Just take a look at this photo. This can be quite shocking, as most of us are used to only seeing the heads. In reality, these statues have whole bodies, often buried up to their shoulders. The bodies are intricately carved, with some displaying detailed arms, hands, and even backs with ceremonial engravings. These details, hidden beneath the earth, reveal that the Moai were intended to be much more than just massive faces watching over the island. The tallest Moai erected, Paro, stands about 33 feet tall and weighs around 82 tons. However, an even larger Moai was found incomplete at the Rano Raraku quarry. Had it been finished, it would have stood a towering 70 feet tall and weighed an estimated 270 tons. In recent years, efforts have been made to restore and preserve the Moai statues. Many that were toppled have been re-erected, and ongoing research aims to unravel the mystery surrounding these statues. Number 10. Can't focus? Just wear the isolator. In a world filled with distractions and sensory overload, it can be hard to focus. Most of us today might resort to turning off our phones or using reward systems to stay focused. But people in the 1920s had a different idea. This is the isolator mask, one of the most perplexing inventions of the early 20th century. This is one of the things in history that will make you go, what were they thinking? Designed by Hugo Gernsback in 1925, the isolator was a helmet-like device that promised to block out distractions and help the wearer focus entirely on their work.
Arrest him. Arrest that man. I don't even know what for, but this thing looks like whoever designed it needs to go to jail. Like, this thing just, arrest him.
Now, Hugo was already known at the time as the father of science fiction, thanks to his literary works. However, he was also a visionary and an inventor on the side. This particular invention of his was a helmet that completely covered the wearer's head, leaving only a small slit for vision, which further limited the field of view to reduce distractions. Inside the helmet, soundproofing materials were used to muffle external noises, making the wearer oblivious to anything happening around them. The wearer didn't need to worry about suffocating as air was supplied through an oxygen tank. While the concept might have been sound in theory, the isolator quickly became notorious for its eerie dystopian appearance. The helmet made the wearer look more like a deep-sea diver or a character from a horror movie than someone trying to get work done. It was bulky, claustrophobic, and by modern standards, impractical. The idea of wearing something so isolating for long periods of time was off-putting to many, and the device never gained widespread popularity. Number 9. Hard drive that needs to be transported by plane. This is an IBM hard drive. These weighed over a ton and took up 16 square feet of space. The small hard drive in your computer probably has somewhere between 500 gigabytes to 1 terabyte, but this one only came with 5 megabytes of memory. Yes, you heard that right. This behemoth of a hard drive wouldn't even be able to store a high-definition image captured today. Given its immense size and weight, moving an IBM hard drive was no small feat. These units were so large that they had to be transported via trucks or airplanes, carefully loaded and unloaded due to their delicate components. This was an era when computing technology was still in its infancy, and the logistics of transporting such massive hardware was part of the cost of doing business. Well, I must say I'm grateful to live in a time when computers can fit inside a backpack. Number 8. The vehicle of the future that never came to be. You know how we imagine the future? It's a possibility that we might be over-imagining things, if that's a thing. Just like how people in the 1900s thought that there would be whale buses, flying cars, and portable wings at the turn of the century in the year 2000, some of our visions of the future might be us overestimating our advancement as mankind. Now, the Dinosphere was one of the earliest attempts to spring humanity into this idealistic future. Imagine a single giant wheel with a driver inside. The Dinosphere. Invented by Dr. John Archibald Purvis in 1930, the Dinosphere was an experimental monowheel. The vehicle was powered by a gasoline engine, and steering was achieved by shifting the driver's weight or using a rudder-like device to guide the wheel's direction. The idea was that this wheel-shaped vehicle would be highly maneuverable and stable thanks to its center of gravity being low and central. For Dr. Purvis, the Dinosphere would revolutionize transportation. The Dinosphere came in several versions, including a single-seat model and a larger version that could carry passengers. The wheel was made of metal and measured about 10 feet in diameter. The driver would sit inside, surrounded by the rolling hoop, and control the vehicle from within this mobile cocoon. Of course, there's a reason why most people don't know about the Dinosphere. It never became popular during its time. The monowheel reached up to 30 miles per hour, but the vehicle was difficult to steer and prone to wobbling. Its single-wheel design meant it lacked the stability of multi-wheeled vehicles, and sharp turns could be hazardous. Moreover, stopping the Dinosphere quickly was a challenge, as the wheel's inertia could cause it to continue rolling even after the engine was turned off. It was featured in newsreels and demonstrations, where it drew crowds eager to see this strange new invention in action. After the initial awe wore off, however, no one really showed interest in actually using it for transportation.
I don't know why, but I feel like that thing would make you like sick. Like, you know how you get on some people get on a boat and they get seasick for like the motion and different things. I feel like that thing would wobble and do different things and make you just, your stomach, like, you know how you get car sickness today when if you look down or do different things in the car, you gotta let that window down and get some air. I feel like that would be the ultimate sickness right there.
Number 7. Salvador Dali and his anteaters. The eccentric and surrealist artist Salvador Dali was known not only for his love for the bizarre or flamboyant personality, but also for his love of anteaters. Out of all the animals to be fascinated with, Dali chose these long-snouted creatures so much that he would often flaunt them on the streets of Paris. People who saw him for the first time surely all did double takes. The anteater also made appearances at social events, where Dali's penchant for shock and spectacle was on full display. At one such event, Dali even walked into a restaurant with the anteater, causing quite a stir among the diners. One thing is for sure, Dali would have probably fit right in today's era when uniqueness and individuality are being celebrated. Number 6. The cure-all moss. Skull moss is a small, unassuming plant in the liverwort family. It grows in damp, shaded environments often found in mountains or forested regions of the northern hemisphere. However, skull moss has a rather macabre trait. It grows on decaying bones, especially in old forgotten cemeteries where human remains were exposed to the elements. In the past, when grave robbing was more common and burial sites were less protected, The sight of green moss covering exposed skulls became a familiar, if unsettling, occurrence. However, despite its association with the dead, skull moss was sometimes used in folk medicine in medieval and early modern Europe. People often use skull moss to treat ailments of the head or mind. The logic behind this use was based on the principle of sympathetic magic, the idea that something connected to the skull could have healing properties related to the head. This led to the moss being included in remedies for headaches, migraines, and even more abstract conditions like
skull moss, but nowadays you hear of sea moss. Skull moss, sea moss. You think at any point they intertwined? I don't know. I just wanted to throw that out on somebody else's brain because that was just echoing in my brain. Like, I hope there's no connection with sea moss, no type of way. I don't know why, but now whoever else takes sea moss sometimes, now you got that to think about too. My gift to you.
melancholy or madness. But is there any scientific merit to this belief? Nope, none at all. Number 5. Motorized roller skates. If you were born in the 1980s, 1990s, or even the early 2000s, perhaps you've experienced that point in childhood when everyone was obsessed with roller skates. If Mike Dreschler's attempt to start a trend succeeded, we probably would have obsessed over motorized skates instead. In 1964, Dreschler tried to popularize skates made by the Motorized Skate Company of Detroit. Just as the name of this company suggests, their skates were powered by an engine via a flexible drive shaft. One of the skates was used for steering and braking, giving its user good control. Spoiler alert, this idea flopped. Not only was it hard to use, but the design was also quite impractical. Wheels on shoes? Perfect. An engine on footwear? An absolute abomination. Number 4. History of Halloween costumes. Halloween costumes have a long history. Trust me, people in the past also took Halloween quite seriously. Perhaps it's the black and white effect of the camera that makes these costumes look more spooky. The tradition of wearing costumes on Halloween can be traced back to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, celebrated over 2,000 years ago. Samhain marked the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter, a time when the Celts believed the boundary between the living and the dead was at its thinnest. To ward off malevolent spirits and avoid being recognized by ghosts, people donned disguises, often made from animal skins and heads. These early costumes were meant to protect and conceal, blending the wearer with the supernatural focus believed to be at play during this liminal time. Well, if people wanted to blend in with literal spirits, it's no wonder their costumes were far more terrifying than those we see today. Number 3. Human chess in the Soviet Union. This photo shows a chess tournament in 1924. Instead of a board and game pieces, humans are part of the game. The human chess match took place in the heart of Leningrad and was a large-scale public event that attracted thousands of spectators. The chessboard was laid out on a grand scale with squares large enough for people to stand in. The pieces were students and members of the Red Army who wore costumes to represent their respective roles: kings, queens, bishops, knights, rooks, and pawns. 2 Grand Masters, Peter Romanovsky and Ilya Rabanovich, orchestrated the moves from high platforms, calling out their strategies to their living pieces. As the game unfolded, the human pieces physically moved across the giant board, following the commands of their grandmasters. Creative or inherently inhumane? Let me know what you think in the comments. Number 2. The Hero Dog. You probably know Balto, the dog often praised for saving the remote town of Nome from a diphtheria outbreak. However, in reality, Balto wasn't the only hero. There was Togo. In January 1925, the remote town of Nome, Alaska was in the grip of a deadly diphtheria outbreak. With no road access and the port frozen over, the only way to get the life-saving antitoxin serum to Nome was to travel on a sled. The distance was a staggering 700 miles. It was an impossible journey, but musher Leonard Sapala knew he needed to make it. And so, Sapala and Togo covered 260 miles, almost half the total distance of the serum run. Not only that, but they also crossed the most death-defying paths. Togo's route included crossing the deadly Norton Sound. It was a frozen sea that gave them a shorter path. The challenge, however, was to reach its other end alive. Perhaps it's the bond between Sapala and his dogs that led them to triumph. Togo, at 12 years old, still led the team through blizzards, sub-zero temperatures, and gale force winds. They journeyed for over 24 hours, enduring frostbite and exhaustion. On the last stretch, the serum was relayed to Balto's team. He completed the final leg, and so, upon his arrival to Nome, his name came out on top. However, for many, Togo was the true hero of the serum run. Togo lived out his final years as a celebrated hero, and today, his legacy is honored by those who appreciate the full story of the Nome serum run. In 2001, Togo was posthumously awarded the most heroic animal of all time by Time magazine. In recent years, his story has been brought to life through documentaries and films that seek to give this unsung hero the recognition he deserves. And now, it's time for today's topic. There's nothing new in the world except the history you do not know. Words of the 33rd U.S. President, Harry S. Truman. We have a long history, and it's possible that some of the things we recognize as the truth might be built on farces and lies. Yet, we continue to look back and study history, the past that made us what we are today. However, not everything is written in recorded history. There are some rare, shocking photos that can't be seen in history books. Take these two photos, for example. On the left, you can see a woman scrutinizing her clothes. Now, it's not new to us that people in the 1900s had some pretty odd beliefs about women and their clothing. The first woman who tried to wear a knee-length bodysuit even got arrested. This is just one of the stories in history that's unbelievable but true. Here's another story in history where the lines of reality and lies get a little blurry. You're looking at what is known as Khan's manta ray.
Fast forward to this day and time, people walk around dang near naked. But they say stark naked. They walk around stark naked.
This creature allegedly spanned 20 feet long and weighed over 5,000 pounds. Now, the problem with this one is that while there are articles about it, people are known to exaggerate a little bit. This guy charged 10 cents per head to view the manta ray after all. So perhaps he wanted the creature to sound more monstrous than it truly was. He did use his earnings to buy the local fire department a new truck though. So perhaps he's good enough not to lie about the manta ray's size? The creature's size is within the realm of possibility. So to this day, we're still torn with believing this photo and thinking this shot was captured with forced perspective to make the ray look bigger. I'll let you be the judge. Number 1. Kashmiri Giants. Seeing this photo will make you realize why legends of giants have persisted for so long. In the late 1800s, stories of extraordinarily tall people living in the Kashmir Valley began to circulate among European travelers. The most famous of these was a family known for their remarkable height, with some members standing over 7 feet tall. James Ricalton, an American educator, adventurer, and early photographer, was one of the first Westerners to document these giants. Ricalton was known for his travels across Asia, where he took numerous photographs later used for educational purposes and exhibitions. During his travels through Kashmir, he encountered the Kashmiri giants and took one of the most famous photographs of the time, a picture of himself standing beside 2 of these giants. Human history is full of triumphs and trials. Seeing these pictures makes me wish I had a time machine to witness these chapters of human history more vividly. If you could turn back time, which era would you like to see?